Welcome to Corrective Consciousness, episode 44, the podcast about our lives and love of pop culture. I am your host, VyseTheBold, and this is...
Lotus Prince.
And professional understudy, OldManStompy.
Always ready when somebody else can't make it into the podcast.
Speaking of which, you know what everyone...
Who's the guy from...
What?
Who's the guy from Baldur's Gate? So there's I think it's Bill or something, Bill the understudy. Maybe somebody in the comments will remind me, but there's a character who is literally, his job is to show up if you accidentally killed a plot-relevant NPC.
Wow.
And he'll just show up. He'll show up and take their place and give you their dialogue and like replace them in the quest line.
That's amazing.
That's hilarious.
So
that's really great.
So that's my job on the podcast. Dan has been killed by a wandering party of chaotic evil adventurers, and now
I was actually about to fill that part in. Like, you know what everyone seems to love is jokes about the person who's not here being fired for some contrived reason this week.
Yeah. I was fired last week because I was attending to my job. Ironically enough. So yeah, I did pass my my state licensing exam, by the way.
Congratulations.
So, for anybody who's curious as to why I was absent, I have another one this week. It's just a day later, so it's a little bit easier in the time of recording here. So I can now serve one more state in the United States.
Yay!
So, it's great.
State of confusion.
And Pyro is out with his mom. Jerk.
Yeah, we are recording on Mother's Day.
So happy Mother's Day to VyseTheBold, who birthed this podcast from his brain womb.
From my womb.
No, you use that to clean your womb.
I use the womb to clean my womb. Anyway.
We have real topics. We have real topics for this podcast. I promise.
We promise. Take us from the top, OldManStompy. Go right ahead.
All right. So I guess I'll go first this week. I don't think I've ever gone first. On last week's podcast, I was talking about Binding of Isaac because it wouldn't be a Corrective Consciousness podcast if we didn't talk about Binding of Isaac for longer.
Binding of what?
Binding of Isaac.
Never heard of it.
Oh.
Never heard of it. Yeah, I'm not surprised. What did you buy for the Switch then?
Binding of Bluesic.
I see. So anyway,
Black of Bladder.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right, I was joking. We haven't actually started podcasting yet. This is all an outtake, and
whoa,
this is an entire blooper reel.
Number one blooper reel.
Yep. So yeah, I was complaining about how there was about how whenever I played as the Lost, I never won a run unless I got Tech X, which is like the best offensive item in the game, or Dead Cat, which gives you 9 lives. Without one of those two crutches, I almost never won a run as either of the two challenge characters in the game. And then immediately after we finished the podcast, I beat Delirium as the Lost with neither of those items.
Nice.
Good for you.
And then I beat the daily, and then the next 4 dailies. So I also got the one I was complaining about last week.
Congratulations.
5 dailies in a row.
That's one of the most frustrating ones in the entire game.
Well, it's not like it's particularly difficult because a lot of the dailies are easy. It's just that there's nothing you can do about it if you die. You have just to wait 5 days until you get the next chance to get the achievement.
Yep.
So now everything in the game is back up to me again in terms of how much time I want to spend grinding away the remaining achievements. And since I'm done with the Lost now, one of the big stumbling blocks towards completion is out of the way. So I guess we were talking about this before the podcast. I have 215 hours left to get the remaining 32 achievements to complete it in a faster Steam in-game time than Lotus Prince did. So.
Yeah, I think I was something like 493 hours.
Yep. So I guess I'll be reporting back on that if they deign to have me on the podcast again.
To be fair, the amount of time he wasted just brushing his teeth to the sound of the music in the game.
Yes, that's what I was doing.
The vast majority of his time.
Well, you have nobody to blame but yourself for that, so.
But he has mighty clean teeth.
I have, in fact, brushed my teeth while Binding of Isaac was running, at least once in the past. So.
Whoa.
I can't say that I derived as much joy from that as Lotus Prince apparently did, but
this is I think this is probably one of the weirdest jokes we've ever even done on the podcast. Like, what the hell even is this?
And it came from me.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's not really a joke. Like I don't want to take out the time in my in-game time played for like whenever I left the game running while I went off to like use the bathroom. Like this is not a speed run. This is not a.
And actually, I actually have done that. Like, I've left the game running, and then I pressed pause, and then I went to eat dinner or something and came back. So,
well, that was the point of the joke. The point of the joke is I was thinking of something mundane that you were doing to waste.
Yeah, I have wasted several hours, like, just being away from the computer while the game was running.
All right. Yeah. Well, anyway, so that's where I am in Binding of Isaac right now. So I've got another 30 or so achievements, which means that people who are listening to this podcast have just that much more time left to deal with this game before it never shows up on the podcast again.
Until Vyse starts playing.
They've started releasing booster packs for Afterbirth Plus, which was part of what the expansion was supposed to allow. Part of it was an API for developing mods. And every month or so, they are allowed to submit mods from the Steam Workshop to be added into the game. And a bunch of those get picked every month, which doesn't add any new achievements, but it does add items that have to be recorded in the collection for Platinum. They're not hard to find. They're not like Angel or Devil Room items, but they're like really weird, and so they're not helpful, and they just sort of pollute the pool when you're looking for the handful of really powerful items that really help you and leverage the power that you need to beat some of the post-game bosses that I need to get these remaining achievements. So like it's interesting because the game is evolving. The biggest change that they added, actually, I think it was like yesterday or 2 days ago, they added a dresser to every floor. It shows up in the starting room of every level, and what it does is it changes your character. It cycles through all the cosmetic upgrades that you've gotten. So if you really like the way the halo looks when you pick it up, and then you pick up something else that overwrites the visual appearance of the halo, you just touch the dresser and it will cycle through all your possible.
Oh, that's fantastic!
Of cosmetic items until you get the one you like. You can also bomb it for items. Cool. So it makes the game slightly easier actually, because it's basically a tinted rock that you get at the start of every level for free.
Nice.
This feature once again makes the console versions obsolete. For a while there, it had caught up with the Switch version and had been the same as the PC release, but now it's once again been proven its obsolescence on console. There's no way that they're gonna send out booster packs like that on console. There's
but at the same time, it was already obsolete by default because the whole point of Afterbirth Plus was that it had this mod API. So you don't have a Steam Workshop for the Switch. Sure. Nintendo wouldn't allow it.
Yeah. Especially for a game like that, jeez.
Yeah.
So let's see, what else? I don't have anything to report in the wrestling world, really. WWE is touring in Europe, which means that they usually have really interesting matches to headline their television shows, but since they're pre-taped 6 hours in advance before they're aired in America, they don't usually have major storyline advancement because the satellite feed... It's really easy to have things spoiled for American fans when they're pre-taped. So there tends not to be a lot of storyline advancement. So there isn't really a lot interesting going on, and there isn't a pay-per-view for the 2 weeks. So if you're really chomping at the bit to hear about what Roman Reigns was up to and whether or not Braun Strowman killed him in the last week, I'm afraid you'll have to wait until next week.
So I wanted to ask you really quickly, now that you're that you're talking about wrestling, just for a quick moment.
Sure.
If you had to pick your favorite wrestling video game, what would you say it is? I mean, you don't have to go into super detail, but I'm interested in hearing what you have to say. Like whether you like the N64 ones, whether you like the Simi ones right now, or Fire Pro. Like, what do you like?
I'll be honest, I never really played a lot of wrestling video games, much at all. So the only thing I have to go by is what people on the online communities that I visit like. So No Mercy for the N64 is extremely popular amongst those communities.
Yeah, the ones made by Ukes, right? Or not
so.
Ukes. They're made by a Japanese company. I think they went out of business.
I believe so. The
2K?
The 2K series is good because it's top of the line and because it has all the recent wrestlers along with a lot of retired wrestlers, so you can put together a lot of dream matches. But I've been told that some of the games that are available for PS2, maybe for PC, maybe Raw versus SmackDown, I want to say, is really easy to mod, and people go back and they insert. There's a really famous mod where they modded Triple H's entrance to have him with a shovel, just like patting down a shovel. So in professional wrestling, what's called burying is when like a famous talent like Triple H or like Hulk Hogan sort of torpedoes the career of an up and comer. And
Oh,
Triple
wow.
H is really notorious for doing that. So someone modded his entrance and put a GIF on the internet that spread like wildfire, made it all the way to ESPN of his entrance. But he's just like digging with a shovel, and then he pats it down at the end. That's his whole entrance. It's just really funny to me.
That's pretty good.
So some of those older games, they still progressively get updated with new entrances and new wrestlers. So I would look into one of those if you're really if you have them available. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I would just buy the newer games because they're certainly not bad, and they have a lot of. I mean, it's the WWE's take, but they have a lot of historical information on like the one that came out for WrestleMania 30 had a mode where you'd play the major matches from all 30 WrestleManias.
Oh wow,
with a nice
That's
sprinkling
awesome.
with a nice sprinkling of all. I mean, they omit some major wrestlers because they're not with the company or they're out of the company's good graces for one reason or another. Like Kurt Angle isn't in there, even though he's like a major
part of the history.
He's a major part of the Attitude Era, which is like the high point of North American professional wrestling. But he was with their competing company TNA at the time, so he didn't make it into the game. Who else?
Sure.
Sting isn't in there, of course. He's one of the most famous wrestlers of all time, but he didn't come to WWF until WrestleMania 31, so he wasn't in that. A bunch of other people. It's a lot. Chris Benoit, of course, because because of the murder suicide. So he's not in anything anymore. And
I'm sure
really,
China's not in there either.
Yeah, China's not in there
because her and Triple H had a relationship that went bad, right? In that.
Well, it's also that she went on and she did softcore porn with one of his ex-best friends, like making fun of him. And
that would do it.
And she was an addict. She died about a year ago.
Yeah.
She of an overdose.
Yeah.
So most likely they'll reconcile because
it's very important to women in wrestling.
Yes, she was one of the first major female wrestlers to compete in intergender matches and win one of the male titles legitimately, as opposed to through a gimmick. She won the Intercontinental title, which is a pretty big deal.
Mm-hmm. I sidetracked you there. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, no, it's still an interesting discussion. They called her the 9th wonder of the world, which is a big deal because it's a reference to Andre the Giant being the 8th wonder of the world.
Oh,
to say that she's the female equivalent of Andre the Giant, that's an important.
It's a huge
distinction.
honor.
Yeah, it's like to draw another comparison. It was a big deal. There's been a recent revolution where WWF has been taking women's wrestling much more seriously than they used to. And they had a title match down in NXT, the developmental territory, between Natalia Neidhart, who's Bret Hart's niece, and Charlotte Flair, who's Ric Flair's daughter, obviously. And they had Ric Flair and Bret Hart come out. Ric Flair, of course, might be the greatest American wrestler of all time. Bret Hart is notorious, not necessarily for being sort of quite in the same tier as Ric Flair, but he's one of the best technical wrestlers ever. And he carried the WWF for the couple of years after Hulk Hogan left. So for them to come down to the ring and be in the corner of their female relatives, to sort of validate them as being the next generation for Natalia to be the next generation of the Hart family, because they have a long and storied history in the WWF. For
That's
Charlotte
really
Flair,
cool.
She goes by, so Ric Flair is called the Nature Boy. That's his epithet. Charlotte right now, she goes by Second Nature. For her to be
That's
worthy,
awesome.
yeah, for her to be worthy of carrying on, which makes sense too, because part of her gimmick is that she's naturally athletic. So it makes a lot of sense for her to be Second Nature. It's really elegant, for her to
clever.
pick up that nickname. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's concise.
Really neat.
Yeah. All right. So so that's my wrestling 10 minutes. A couple other little things. So I started watching Kamen Rider after our discussion last week. Kamen Rider
I got really interested in that because I was listening to the podcast and I was like, wow, this is something I've always been really curious about, and just like it's so hard to get at being an American other than like through torrents.
You could always watch Masked Rider. That was fantastic.
I was just gonna say there's Masked Rider if you could find that,
and there's that one
also
Kamen Rider Ryuki fighting game for the Wii. What?
There's a Sega CD FMV game that made it out over here.
Oh, there was that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
based on Masked Rider, obviously. But
Yeah.
Well, so I liked watching the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers when it came out. So I didn't really mind that the production values on the fight sequences were poor. People who have listened to the podcast in the past have heard me talk about how I can't stand watching Z-grade movies, and they might ask, why do I like watching Kamen Rider? the reason, if you recall, why I complained about watching things like Neil Breen movies isn't just that they're bad; it's that they're bad and they're also boring, right? Because it's not interesting to me. Like, it's funny.
The Room is not boring.
Your Kamen Rider isn't bad; it's just aged.
Well, yeah, so I've watched The Room, and that's, like, to me, like, learning about that is really interesting. Like, to learn about how, like, there's a random scene where they're throwing a football around, and it turns out that, like, Tommy Wiseau put that in the scene in the movie because he thinks that's what
Americans
it means
like
to be like, a real traditional American, and that was the kind of movie he was trying to make.
Yeah.
So, like, there's nothing to learn from Neil Breen movies, except that, you know, he thinks that the government is corrupt, and he does literally everything possible wrong when making a movie, like, in a hilariously absurd fashion.
And if you couldn't figure that out in one of his movies, don't worry, he'll show you in all 4 of them.
So like, he has all these movies where he talks about fighting world corruption, but his character is always, like, omnipotent, basically.
Yeah.
And that's not interesting, because, like, the whole problem with corruption is how difficult it is to undo when you're just one person. And that's an interesting story. There's nothing about Neil Breen movies which is interesting whatsoever. The Kamen Rider is interesting. Like, it is fascinating to me to watch. So I started watching from the very beginning. I watched, over the last 2 days, the first 5 episodes of the very first series, because I kind of want to learn about the conventions of the series, and I want to watch it evolve into the series it is today.
Awesome.
Yeah, so, like, I don't know, Lotus, I know you've watched a few of the series in the past.
Yeah, 3.
Yeah, so I don't know if you've ever watched the original. Like,
I've seen pictures of what he looks like insect dude on a motorcycle, but that's really it. Like, the oldest thing I've seen might have been, like, an episode of Amazon or something.
All right, so the old series, it's written almost like a B horror movie, more so than an action adventure series or whatever. Like, there are things about the series that I didn't know just from watching these 5 episodes were even a thing. Like, none of the monsters explode. You know, there's no transformation sequence. It's really bloody.
That is one thing that reminds me, though, because some monsters do explode. There was one thing I forgot about, which was in Kamen Rider Kuga, the monsters do explode. But what I thought was really entertaining is you might not notice it until way later in the series, but the more monsters he kills, the more he's upsetting the balance of something. I forgot what it was. And the monsters' explosions are actually getting bigger, and it gets to the point where he has to Dragon Ball Z, like, take them out in the middle of nowhere before he kills them, or else he'll really damage property. It's like, wow, really?
Well, in the original series, in the first few episodes, you can tell they're really trying to they're experimental. They're trying to show what a monster would look like if it, like, dissolved, if it or they're trying different death sequences. Like, in the second episode, he, like, literally, like, throws people off a building, and you don't see their bodies, but you see, like, a splatter of blood that gets, like, thrown in from off camera. It's, like, really jarring compared to like, what the series used to be. And the one I just watched, episode 5, the death sequences are, like, the monsters and the goons, like, they just, like, writhe on the ground, and then all of a sudden it's a cutaway to, like, a pile of, like, costume pearl beads that are in a shape like the monster, and then they just, like, unspool off camera. It's, like, really bizarre.
That's
the camera
cool.
angles are all over the place. They're, like, entire fight sequences where it's just upside down for no reason.
Oh, by the way, speaking of all over the place, this is something you're probably going to notice. I don't know if they did it from the beginning, but the fight sequences, like, continuity at this point is a trope, but it makes no sense. Like, you're gonna see, like, they're fighting, like, in the middle of town, and then someone throws a punch and a guy goes flying, and now they're in the woods, and, you know, like, now they're on top of a bridge. Like they just keep changing. It's like, where are you? And actually, speaking of which, they use the same locations in a lot of the series. So one of the cool things is, like, there's this town center they're in that I've seen in all 3 iterations.
Like right across the street from the production office.
Well, no, well, the thing is, what's really cool about it is if you watched all the series in sequence, you'll see that particular location in Japan just get filmed in better and better quality, and eventually it's in widescreen HD, and it's like, hey, like, it's been there the whole time.
Nice. So I will just want to call out one other scene that I just watched about a half an hour before this podcast started that I thought was really funny. But not because it had anything to do with the process of making the show. The plot of the episode is that a monster is making earthquakes appear, and they're building an intensity, implying that they're, you know, gonna push off a major quake in Japan. He's trying to figure out how they're executing these earthquakes, and he's taking a Geiger counter, and he's like scanning the Geiger counter on a map of the earthquakes, and the Geiger counter is going off, and he's like, "There's radiation activity at all of these quake sites," and it's like, how can you tell that by putting a Geiger counter on the map? Like, what kind of map?
I do like weird contrived stuff like that.
what kind of map is this that it has the radiation from the quake sites?
When he sticks a pin in it, he sees it come down from the sky.
So
giant pin comes down. Oh.
In this series, he's really like tortured over the fact that he's a cyborg, because this is the first series, and it's not taken for granted. Like, this like level of transhumanism has not been established as a positive thing in like the Japanese zeitgeist yet. So, like in the 4th episode, he like tries to comfort a child whose sister just got eaten by a carnivorous plant, and so he touches him on the shoulder, and it like hurts the child. He's like, "I cannot control my strength." He's like staring at his hands. He's like, "With these arms, I cannot even comfort a child."
Yeah,
like
some shows are darker than
working
other.
man's hands.
It's so like maudlin. I can't tell if I should take it seriously or not.
No, I mean that is true, but like I said last time, different series have very different attitudes. Like in the newer Kamen Riders that I saw, they're just dudes that wear power belts. Like they're not all. I've seen one where it's definitely a cyborg being made, but they're not all like that. So like the logic behind their insectoid look when they're transformed, just. It varies from series to series. And again, some series are more upbeat than others. Like, I keep bringing up Kuga, but Kuga's definitely the darkest of the 3 series I saw. Like, Ryu got dark because it's the Madoka series, but Kuga is just always pretty oppressive. Like I said, like, the monsters look scary in that one. The opening theme is more serious than other themes I've heard, and it just, like... It just doesn't stop. Like I said, the monsters are just killing people and keeping score for a game. That's it. Beat those. Just like, Jesus.
Well, anyway, I look forward to getting to that eventually. I'm not sure at what point, like, am I going to watch the entire series? Probably not. It's like 98 episodes. I don't know if I'm going to watch all the old stuff, but I want it to mean something to me. Like, the organization is called Shocker in the first series, and it shows up a lot. And I want, like... When I watched the original Doctor Who, I didn't watch the original. I watched the revival. You know, the
of course you didn't. You can't watch all the old episodes yet.
Well, some of them have been lost to history. They don't exist anymore.
Well, not anymore. Not anymore. They found most of them.
There's a lot of the second Doctor which is missing still.
Yeah, they found them. They found the majority of them.
Okay, that's pretty recent. I mean, I recall a lot of the issue was that the BBC just didn't maintain the tapes, so they've had to cobble them together from previous broadcasts.
They found them. People's tapes. They found them all in a broadcast station in South Africa or something.
Nice.
They found almost all of them. I think there's only like very few missing. There's very few.
It's pretty cool. Now. It's a pretty big deal too, because as I recall, like the regeneration of the first Doctor into the second Doctor, that episode was missing despite being a really historic, really important event in the timeline of the Doctor. And the only recording of that for a really long time was actually of a replay of that episode in a children's television show.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Like after it happened. So it's cool that they found it. Anyway, so back to the sort of main point is that, like, the Daleks were always the primary antagonists of Doctor Who. And one of the conceits of the new series was that both the planet where the Time Lords came from and all of the Daleks were gone forever. Like, the Doctor was the last of his kind, for whatever reason. And how that happened was part of the mystery that we were trying to resolve as the new series continued. But eventually you run into a Dalek. And the Doctor was like, he practically had a panic attack. Now, the Daleks, they look goofy. They look like little tin cans with a plunger and a laser pointer attached to them. They don't look intimidating at all. But you're supposed to believe that this is like the pants-shittingly scariest thing the Doctor has ever seen in his life. And like, you eventually start to believe it as you watch the new series, but it didn't mean as much as if I'd watched the series, older series, and I'd seen them as
shit.
Oh
god.
like if you when you see the Klingons in some of the newer Star Trek stuff, after seeing them originally and having them been established as one of the primary antagonists of the Federation in the original Star Trek series, that's really interesting.
Well, the thing is, a whole generation of people, including us included, grew up with Star Trek: The Next Generation, where Klingons were actually good guys. They were part of the Federation.
Well, they were neutral. They weren't necessarily. We were at peace with them.
They weren't the same status as they were in the original series. The original series, they were like the villain of the week almost. You know, them and Romulans were evil all the time, right?
Right.
Whereas you had like friendly Klingons. You even had one on the bridge.
Right.
I mean, come on.
Yeah. So anyway, that's part of what I want to watch the early Kamen Rider for. I want to understand these references. I want to be scared when Shocker shows up again. I want to be excited when one of the old writers comes out of retirement, for the special episodes. Or
yeah, those are always cool when they just like bring like 10 writers together. It's like, whoa, like, it's fan service that doesn't play into the plot at all, but it's cool to see.
Exactly. So yeah, so that's what I've been watching. Otherwise, I don't have too much else to talk about. The only other note I would make is that I made sure to pick up Alan Wake.
Yeah.
Because I've been told that due to licensing issues that it will no longer be on sale, at least in America. So if you're interested in that game,
get it now.
Or if you have an Xbox, then I guess you just don't care very much.
Well, Xbox download it from the network or else have a physical copy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a fantastic game in a lot of ways, and really great if you're a Twin Peaks or Stephen King fan.
Yeah, I really need to watch Twin Peaks so I can understand Alan Wake and Deadly Premonition.
Half the things you like.
Yeah, right.
I mean, not necessarily Deadly Premonition. You can just play Deadly Premonition. It will tell you a lot about Twin Peaks.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a lot of time I took up. So, Lotus, how have you been this week?
Good. So, Vyse, how have you been this week? No, okay, no, I do have some things to talk about. So,
I thought we were actually going to let Vyse have his turn for once.
It's never Vyse's turn. So, for starters, and anyone who follows my channel already knows this, but I finally started actually, God forbid, uploading Let's Play installments of Rule of Rose. It's finally here, whoa! And it's really interesting to see because, I don't know, I'm kind of fascinated by the reactions in the comments because half of them are, oh my god, I'm excited about seeing this game because I never get to see it, and whoa, this really looks oppressive. Oh my god, is this going to be like this bleak the whole time? And the other half of the comments are like, oh man, I thought you'd never get to this. I remember playing this back when. And like, a bunch more people have this game than I thought they did. It's just, I mean, like, I don't have the largest...
people in your audience would.
Even so, I don't have the largest audience in the world, and like, even if they're into weird esoteric games, like, I mean, I was able to get Rule of Rose when it was on store shelves, and obviously it was on store shelves, so people bought the game, but I'm amused by the percentage of people who leave comments, like, who have had it or still do. It's just like, oh, okay. So I just thought that was amusing. But anyway, yeah, Rule of Rose is going up, and I look forward to seeing people's reactions to basically any cutscene in the game, because it's just like, it kicks you when you're down, like...
That's the reason why you play the game.
The entire game. Like, the game sets up with, like, oh, you're an unlucky girl, oh boy, story you're about to have, and like everything that happens is like, yep, we told you so, anyway, more of the same, and you're like, oh god, like it just doesn't stop. It's so brutal, like, especially toward the end. It's like, oh my, for God's sake.
I'm actually going to forego playing the game to actually watch your Let's Play of it.
Actually,
and experience it that way.
Well, speaking of which, I've said this to you off the air, but sometimes when people leave comments on my stuff that's relevant to that particular subject, I've had a couple people say, oh, I remember in particular for the first No More Heroes, oh, that's what this game was? Oh, I've seen a little bit of this. Oh, I'm sorry, but it's episode 2, but I'm going to stop watching now because I want to play it for myself. And usually I actively encourage that. You know, I see Let's Plays as a plan B. You know, like, if you can play the game yourself, I recommend that you do. You know, some, like...
It's kind of like watching a movie with commentary. You know, you do it the second time you watch it.
Yeah, like, you get more immersion if you play it first. Now, I have had some people do, like, the horror games, like, oh, I'm too scared to play it myself, so I'm watching. Like, okay, well, in that case, that's also a plan B. Rule of Rose is a game where I would make a very rare exception to that. You don't really want to actually play that game. It's not very fun. The combat is clunky, even for survival horror. Hitboxes are weird. Invincibility frames when enemies get up, and then all of a sudden, but they can combo you. Opening doors and picking up items, you have to get used to stopping moving. You know, if you keep running into the table where the item's sitting, you might just not grab it. You have to, like, stop. It's like, it sounds simple, but if you don't know that, you could just keep running in place like a fool, and I did that a few times because I was, like, early in the game. The game's not fun. And yeah. If you want to get through it, if you want to just go, you can do that. But if you want to look for the secret items, good good luck if you're not using a guide. You know, the idea is that you can use one item to have your dog look for what it smells like, and you could find secret items that way, but unless it's a plot item, he can't smell it from anywhere, and even if you're in the same room as the item, he has a range, so you have to guess and check for literally hours every chapter without a guide, and it's like, no, even with a guide, I had some trouble. This is one of the games I cut out. You know, some games I cut out more footage than others. I cut a lot from this of just like wandering with a guide, and this is not because of my sense of direction. Like like the levels are designed in a way that you can only explore what it wants you to for this particular chapter. So I'm like, all right, now I got to go to this room now. Okay, let me do it. But the door to that room is locked, and I have to take the roundabout way. But that wasn't the case, you know, last chapter. It's a serious pain. You know, it doesn't do the Silent Hill thing where it marks which doors are locked, so it is a nuisance. Like, the game is honestly more trouble than it's worth. If you own the game, it's cool to say that you have it. But this is a very rare case where I would say just watch it. Like, especially because it's expensive, fuck it, just watch it. You don't want to play this. But that's Rule of Rose. Also, I actually streamed for the first time on, I don't remember, like a few days ago. And it was kind of funny getting a hang of streaming because YouTube gives you like streaming menus and stuff like that. And I was trying to like make the stream private, like unlisted, because I was testing the streaming. Can I do it first? But what I didn't realize is that I was streaming from my capture software, which, by the way, is extremely easy. You press the stream button and you're doing it. But you also have to set your capture software's privacy settings to unlisted, or else it'll override YouTube. So I had a bunch of people pop in. They're like, oh, you're going to play Yakuza 5? And all I was doing was just sitting on the main menu and saying testing and pressing up and down on the menu to see if it was registering. And I was just sitting there for like 5 minutes, and there's just a load of nothing going on. I'm like, this wasn't supposed to be public. Oh, geez. I eventually got a proper stream going, and it was an unlisted one where I had some people from like Patreon come in, and there were only 2 or 3 people there at any given time, but it was pretty fun. I was just kind of dicking around in Yakuza and going for food and drink for Saejima. So I was like, hey. So it was kind of cool. Like, the stuff I might do off camera, I can give the opportunity to be on camera and make it more laid back, like, hey, good evening, people, how's it going? Because this is not the stuff I would have for a traditional Let's Play where I'm just grinding for 3 hours just so I can go to restaurants. You know, that's not really something you want to see in a Let's Play, but for streaming, you kind of have that as a backdrop to go with just interacting with the chat. So it was fun in that regard. Although if I ever go through plot stuff, that'll be on there too, but it was more of like an excuse to have discussions with people in the chat. So that was pretty fun. Only a couple more things. I mentioned Little Nightmares last week. Mr. Ryu and I beat that. It's a really short game. In fact, one of the achievements is beat it in under 90 minutes without dying. That can actually be a little hard, but you could save scum if you put your save on a flash drive and do that little, manipulation. It's a short game, but it's fun. Like I said, it's not the kind of game that's going to keep you awake at night, like, oh my god, like Little Nightmares, I'm never playing that at night. But, like, it is scary when you're actually playing it. It really is. Like I said, you're a little person, or at least a regular-sized person in a world of giants who definitely want to eat you. And even though only one person might chase you at any given time, maybe 2, man, that sucks. Like, they tend to be faster than you are, and you can go into hiding places, you can go under tables. They might try reaching under the table, but with the exception of Mr. Long Arms, they have, like, stubby arms, so don't stay there, but...
It sounds terrifying, Mr. Long Arms. Ugh.
Dude, he might be...
I watched this, in spite of my best efforts to avoid everything related to him, my sister-in-law was watching PewDiePie play this game,
I want to watch, or I want to play this because I know nothing about it. But now that you say somebody named Mr. Long Arms, I'm immediately.
That's what I'm calling him, but it's a guy with long arms.
I know what you're talking about, and that was definitely like horrifying. I watched that part of the game, and then I made them stop, showing me the video so that I can play the game sort of honestly without seeing like the whole remainder of the game.
Yeah,
if it escalates from there, like. that's pretty early on. And
yeah, that's level 2 of 5. Yeah. It's like, like level 1 doesn't even have a proper giant boss enemy, so he's the first real enemy, and it's like, oh, come on, really? Like, the first you see of him, you don't really see him. Like, you're trapped in a cage, and you're like, okay, where do I go? And then you see, like, a hand stretch out from the side of the screen, but, like, you're kind of far away from the side of the screen, and it just keeps stretching towards some other cage and pulls it away. And you can kind of pan the camera with the right stick, so I'm like, let's look to the right. And I look to the right, and all I see is more arm, and not what it's attached to. And I'm like, you have got to be fucking kidding me. like, forget that. And what's also creepy is when you finally do meet the guy, because of his long arms, you know how you can, like, you know, if you're doing a chin-up, you know, you raise your arms over your head and you pull yourself up. I mean, he can do that, but, like, really high. So it looks like he just floats away or, like, descends from the sky. And that's not what he's doing at all. He's moving normally, but he's got really long arms, so he can effectively come from anywhere, and you don't know where it's going to be. Like, the encounters are scripted, but you don't know what they are the first time you're playing. So it's just like, ugh. Like, theoretically, he could basically teleport anywhere he wants, just show up on my screen, so it makes you really uncomfortable, which is of course the point. He's like the
scary version of Mr. Tickle.
Wow, bringing that back. Yeah,
from the Mr. Men.
Yeah. Well, he's also kind of like Freddy Krueger in his first appearance in Nightmare on Elm Street. Remember that, where he had his long arms stretching out to either side? He's just like, heh, heh, heh. And you're like, nope. like it's basically that. He's the slowest enemy in the game. Like, you can not really outrun him, but if he grabs for you, you could hop out of the way, unlike other enemies, which are clearly faster than you. So you'll see where it goes. I would argue it does escalate. Like, level 3's enemies, I don't think are as scary as the appearance of Mr. Longarms, but what they are and do is arguably scarier, and then it definitely escalates from there. I still say Longarms is the scariest character in the game, but that's okay, because the situations are scarier than he is later on. Especially level 4. So, Little Nightmares is fun. So now, this is so bad. You know, I've been so slow in putting Let's Plays online and everything. I'm finally doing Rule of Rose, but in the meantime, I have 3 fully recorded Let's Plays now. I have Undertale with OldManStompy and Minty Mitts. I have now Little Nightmares with Mr. Ryu. And for the purpose of creating a different video, I actually I did a full Let's Play of Resident Evil Remake a long time ago, which I don't want to upload until I get to that game in order of Resident Evil's release. So I'm just sitting on that. Like, you're going to see footage from that Let's Play in a different video probably months before I ever put that thing up. The last thing I wanted to bring up was, for my birthday, my brother got me 2 tickets to see a stage adaptation of Clue, like the movie. And
nice.
Yeah, so I went to see it with our friend Perry, and it was a lot of fun. You know, it paid a lot of homage to the movie, of course. In fact, this is a bit of trivia, but do you remember the movie's tagline?
Not off the top of my head. I'm sure you'll tell it to me now.
Yeah. No, but I'm sure you'll tell us. Yeah, the tagline...
When do we get to the fireworks factory?
That's it. That's the tagline. No, the tagline was, it's not just a game anymore. And so on the playbill, the tagline is, it's not just a game and it's crossed off movie anymore. I was like, hey.
Nice.
So it was interesting because a lot of elements of the play were, of course, the same as the movie, including most of the characters, although Professor Plum was wildly different, because he was like a theater actor rather than a psychiatrist. But the whole thing with it being in the 50s and like communism was just a red herring, and you know, all that stuff, that was still in there. The results, like whodunit, is the same as one of the movie's endings, but how you go about it was different. Like, the way they went into the secret passage was different. The secret passage itself was different from the movie, but some scenes they did the same, which I thought were really creative. Like, when you have the motorist in a room talking on the phone, like, I'm in this really strange house, and weirdest of all, I thought I recognized my old boss. And, you know, you see, like, the lights are all off except for that part of the stage, and you see, like, the gloved hand reach in from the side and bonk him with a lead pipe really or something. Cool. Like, yeah, they managed to do those scenes. I was like, hey. And also, the whole gimmick with Clue is you're going all throughout this mansion. So they had sliding walls and like backdrops that represented different rooms, and they just had like montages of them kind of running across the stage and back while the scenes were changing, and it worked really effectively, I think. They did a great job with that. And because it's a stage production, they were able to play up certain parts of the movie. Like, remember that scene where they're playing Shake, Rattle, and Roll while they're, concealing the dead bodies by, like, dancing with them or making out with them? And, the dead motorist is on the chair, and they just gave him a bottle of alcohol. They played that up.
Yeah, when the police officer comes in.
Yeah, they're just having a good time. Whoa, that guy's drunk. Dead drunk. You're dead right. Well, so they had that scene. But they played that up like crazy with a whole dance number because they're on stage. The guy who played Wadsworth, Tim Curry's character, the guy on stage on that, man, he killed it. Like, he was really nailing like that quick, witty delivery. And all that sort of good stuff. So it was very entertaining to see him basically do a Tim Curry throughout the game. And he was also kind of the play's narrator. 2 or 3 times throughout the play, everything would stop and the spotlight would go on him, and he would monologue to the audience like, so, have you been paying attention? You know who has been where and who hasn't, etc., etc., and kind of addressing the audience to give little updates. That was pretty entertaining. And they also played up the idea that, with Clue, the movie, the whole thing was, the police are going to be here in an hour. Oh my god. They kept bringing attention to that because it's a play. So it's like, we have only like 40 minutes left because it's like a 90-minute play. And by the end of it, he's like, we only have 4 or 5, 7 minutes tops. Like, it was pretty entertaining in that regard. They did a bunch of stuff like that. So it was definitely a fun experience. And the characters in the play, except again for Professor Plum for profession change reason, the characters in the play really looked like their movie counterparts, which was pretty cool, down to the hairstyles and everything. And by the way, I didn't know this until a little before. Like, my mom mentioned it to me when she had looked it up. Mrs. Peacock was actually played by Sally Struthers, so that was pretty cool. Yeah. And so, of course, when each person enters the mansion for the first time and they ring the doorbell, like, she got a big round of applause when she showed up. So that was pretty awesome. Cool. Yeah, so overall, really entertaining play. Would recommend.
Nice.
So that has been my week. How about you, Vyse?
So the primary game that I played this week, over the last 2 weeks, I didn't get a lot of time to play video games, because I didn't even really have much free time to begin with. I didn't even have enough time for the podcast, unfortunately, because of my crazy work schedule and the ancillary demands that it's been having lately. But I did get a couple little bits here and there that were meaningful. So I played Mario Kart 8 Deluxe a little bit more than I had played when I initially got it. I actually was playing it with my girlfriend, and my girlfriend is not huge into video games, but she can appreciate them, and also played them a lot when she was younger, but didn't really start playing them again until her and I started having a relationship. And she's the kind of person that really kind of likes to do anything, just as long as it's fun. If it's a good time, she'll be, into it. So we were playing Mario Kart 8 together, and we had a really good time, and she fell right back into it because she was a big Crash Team Racing fan back when she was, a tween, when back in like 97, 98 or so. Mm-hmm. So it was pretty cool that she was into playing it with me, and we were a pretty good match for the most part. She was having a lot of fun. So it was really cool to be able to bring over the Switch and hook it up to the television over there very easily. A lot easier than pretty much any other console, because it's it's made to be portable and easy to do. You can fit your entire Switch setup in your backpack and take it over somewhere. So, worst comes to worst, you can even just put it into kickstand mode, but we didn't need to do that, so we didn't. But it was really cool playing with her, and I just think that one of the coolest things about the system is it's opportunities it gives you to play these multiplayer experiences unlike any other system can. Like every other portable system, you need other portable systems, generally speaking, to play multiplayer games. It requires other people to have the same equipment you do. This one, you can have a multiplayer experience by one person having one thing, which is really
great.
It's the equivalent of having like a deck of cards, right?
Yeah,
a $250 deck of cards with a $50 expansion.
You understand what I mean here.
Yes.
There's nothing else like it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to be the huge success point of the console. Once Smash Brothers comes out for it and a couple other multiplayer favorites, Splatoon, probably whenever I have faith that Nintendo will come up with something brand new for this system that they haven't yet, like a brand new IP that will take advantage of the system and its multiplayer aspects. 1-2 Switch is a cool proof of concept and it's fun, but I have a feeling that they're going to come up with an in-depth game that you'll want the system for.
But regarding a new game you want the system for, no doubt. But new IP, like they did Splatoon for the Wii U, but when's the last IP? The new IP Nintendo created before that, like Star Fox on the SNES, Pikmin. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah,
it's still too.
You can actually see this in Smash Brothers. They did the All-Star mode by initial
Genesis
IP.
Yeah,
and there's a big gap between I think it's Solid Snake and Wario, where obviously Snake is not even a Nintendo character, and they even make a reference to the fact that these days it's really hard to make a new IP without, and to be able to sell the amount of games that you need to justify a AAA game without brand recognition of an existing character. So it's pretty tough.
But I have a feeling that they'll come up with something new, if not using all of the characters like they've been doing well. They could just come up with a new type of party game. Even if they came out with like a brand new Mario Tennis. I know that the Wii U version is relatively new, but if they came, like a lot of people were disappointed in the Wii U version of Mario Tennis. What if they made a much more improved version of it?
I would take that because the Wii U version, from what I've heard, plays well, but there's nothing there.
It's just not like full feature.
Everything's unlocked. Yeah. There isn't even a single player tournament mode. I was hyped. I don't often get hyped for like Mario style games. I haven't in a while. I just don't really play them. But I loved Mario Tennis on N64 and GameCube, and the Wii was just the remake of the GameCube one, or a port. So when I heard about Mario, whatever it was called, Ultra Tennis or something for the Wii U, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Yes. And then I heard that it's just, for single player, it's just not worth it at all. So I was like, well, I guess I'm not buying it then.
I might be in the minority here with Nintendo faithfuls, but I don't really care. Because I'm all for the general population coming into good graces with a company like Nintendo that I want to succeed. Mm-hmm. So I'm okay with them releasing better versions of old games.
No, I'm totally happy with that.
Very much okay with it.
If you give me fully fledged Mario Tennis, I'll be first in line.
Yeah, I am totally okay with them coming out with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe for a system that way more people are interested in. And I'm okay with these things.
And not to mention, this isn't a dick move like Marvel vs. Capcom 3 Ultra, which isn't even compatible with the previous version. It was released 5 minutes later. The Wii U in general wasn't very popular. Mario Kart 8, people liked Mario Kart 8, but at this point it's been several years. And also, again, the Wii U was not popular. So, I can understand why Deluxe exists. It's it feels more real than MVC 3 Ultra did, or Ultimate. Not Ultra Ultimate.
It's breathing new life into it. It's exposing the same thing to an audience that never got a chance to see it.
Exactly.
And I'm okay with that. And they're also improving it. And they also listen to fans. With Mario Kart 8, they fixed the one thing that fans had a problem with.
Battle mode.
So that means they listened.
Yeah.
That means they listened. So they are listening.
Yeah, I've seen gameplay of battle mode in the new game, and it looks fun.
we had a blast. Me and my girlfriend, we just had a blast playing it. So, it's just one of those things where I'm just really happy to say that the Switch is a great thing because it is a good experience to use the system in general. It's one of the coolest experiences. It's not the same thing as playing a PS4. You don't have that it does its own thing, and it does something that nothing else can easily. I think it's a success on that level.
But the funny thing about that is that that's exactly like the Nintendo Switch. I feel works better than the Wii U, but that's exactly why the Wii U fails. You can't get the games on the PS4 and the Xbox One on the Wii U because like the programming for it is just insane with that gamepad. So like that's why there were so few games, comparatively speaking, for the Wii U, because developers were like too afraid to even try. It's like I do just fine with Microsoft and Sony. With the Switch, I feel that the fact that you can play with regular gamepads if you want to makes it work so much better. And if you want to do first-party stuff on it, then you know what? Have a blast.
Yeah. So I did want to mention that and how happy I was for that. We had played that after watching Guardians of the Galaxy 2, which I did want to talk about Volume 2, I guess, if you want to be official here. I did want to talk about how much I liked Guardians of the Galaxy 2, and I saw it a second time. I saw it once last weekend, and then a second time with her. We went to a new experience that I hadn't taken part in. We had gone to an AMC theater that has a restaurant. In it, they serve you food while you're watching the movie, which is really neat. I'm a big movie fan, and I don't want to see theaters go away. And so I like this evolution of theaters becoming still as a social experience. So dinner and a movie all at once is a really cool thing. It's really interesting. They take during the previews, they take your order and they serve you during it, and of course you can call a waiter over with a press of a button, and you can order another drink or something like that. So it's a really neat experience, and it's not as cumbersome as you think it would be. It's a lot more organized, and it wasn't that distracting, during the movie. So it was pretty neat.
Okay.
And so I wanted to talk about how I first of all, I think it's great that Disney took a risk with the Guardians. Because the Guardians were never popular. Even Marvel geeks weren't really into them. They've always been like a C or D tier team. They've never really had a spotlight. They were never really important in terms of the big events in Marvel history. But apparently, from what I heard is that Marvel has extremely difficult and labyrinthine contracts with all kinds of different companies over likeness rights and things like that because of all of their dealings over time. You got to remember that Marvel Comics basically started in the 40s, so they were called Timely, I think, back then, but they are a company with a long and storied history that went through rises and falls, especially in the 90s. They almost went bankrupt. They went bankrupt, like, I think one time, and were bought out by like a toy company.
They did declare bankruptcy. I remember
they did declare bankruptcy.
It was right around the time I stopped collecting comics.
Yeah. It was after like comics were at their biggest, during the collector phase, and then they shat the bed. So they were bought out by Toy Biz, which doesn't even exist anymore. Just to give you an idea. So, they grew back to prominence, and then with the movies, the movies were scattered all over the place, and that's why we kind of have the Fox movies and now the Disney movies, and they finally got Spider-Man back from Sony, but they have to pay for all these rights and things. So Guardians of the Galaxy kind of is untouched by any of that because they weren't popular. And then they made it into something brand new. They took an actor that is really good at being a comedic force on screen, and they made him the star of this band of losers, and made that the point. They're a band of losers that kind of make fun of the situations that they're in, and don't take the epicness that's going on around them as seriously as any other characters would in any other superhero setting. So it's great. I also don't like Marvel when they go into space. I tend to not like those comics because I feel like they get away from what I like about comics the best, which is social commentary.
Well, the interesting thing about Guardians though is that they aren't Spider-Man and now they're in space. Like, their universe is in space, so they could still have all of the real world relations that you'd expect, just it happens to be in a different location.
Yeah, and no, it was really good. They're using space correctly, which is also social commentary. Like, you use other races of space beings to compare them to things that are happening on Earth.
Yeah, it's like
just like Star Trek does. Yeah, Star Trek does that. So they're doing that correctly, but also still being really funny while doing it. And they also have a fantastic director. I've always loved James Gunn. I'm a big fan of him. When I was a big Slither fan when that came out. Slither was a great movie.
Oh, but by the way, speaking of James Gunn, regarding Easter eggs, was Lloyd Kaufman in Volume 2, and if so, where?
I don't know where he...
Because apparently he cameos... I didn't know this, but apparently he cameos in all of James Gunn's movies, and I saw him in the first movie. He was just some jeering prisoner.
For anybody who doesn't know, Lloyd Kaufman is one of the co-founders of Troma Films, where James Gunn got his start. That would be the movie studio that produced The Toxic Avenger, amongst other trashy films. But James Gunn got his start making trashy Troma films, and I love those Troma films. I think they're great, but they are like trash and they know it.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the fun of those movies. They're low budget, but they're most of them have a lot of really cool practical effects, and a lot of really strange things happen in them, and very disgusting things happen in them where none of that would never happen in any other movie.
Dude, Beware Children at Play has a montage of just killing children.
Yeah, it's just like everything's in bad taste.
Like on one hand, they're the bad guys, but on the other hand, try to find another movie that does that.
Yeah, I mean, there's only every once in a while.
Or don't try very hard because it's kind of gross.
It's terrible.
You really have to know what you're doing if you're going to attempt to do something like that.
That is true.
Yeah, and they're also Lloyd Kaufman is also the hero of the angry video game nerd as well, James Rolfe.
Yeah.
That's right. He did an episode with him, right? He showed up as a special guest appearance.
Yeah, he did like a regular interview, and Lloyd Kaufman actually appeared in a video game nerd episode where they played Toxic Crusaders for the Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he said he's a crazy person in real life too. Like you're just around him and he's just saying gross things constantly.
Yeah, no, that's apparently kind of a thing. The funny thing is apparently he's a fan of the nerd as well, which just entertains me.
But getting back to my original point, Disney took a huge risk. They took all these offbeat stars. Chris Pratt was not a movie star yet. He was a TV star that had gotten popular on Community, not Community, Parks and Rec. I'm sorry, Parks and Rec, and he was not a hunk. They actually got him into shape, and made him a superhero, and they got an offbeat director who had only really made offbeat things. He helped make Lollipop Chainsaw.
Wait, Chris Pratt? Before that. Oh no, James Gunn. James Gunn. Yeah. Yeah, I was like,
they got a little-known director that film nerds wouldn't know who he is, but mainstream people wouldn't know who he is. and they took like they made them an integral part of their big crossover universe, with the Marvel cinematic universe. I just thought it was so awesome that they took a chance and then won everybody over with their original trailer. Trailer with I've Got This Feeling playing, and it's just a hilarious movie.
So, and by the way, we brought this up a little bit. We brought this up a little bit during the last week's podcast that you weren't here. That like a lot of trailers these days, since the passing of Dan LaFontaine, have become short films on their own right. That where the thesis is that they want you to watch the full movie. So they have to figure out how to tell you what the spirit of the movie is without spoiling a lot of what's actually in the movie. And the original Guardians of the Galaxy trailer did that flawlessly.
Yeah, fantastic. It was one of those where like, I don't care about the Guardians, and I'm a comic book nerd. Like there's like but then that showed up, and I'm like, I'm sold. I want to see it. And it's just like.
And by the way, one other thing, this isn't necessarily for the most mainstream audiences, although it was a AAA game, so at least for the game audiences. But my first experience with anything that had anything to do with Guardians of the Galaxy was to bring back Marvel vs. Capcom 3 Ultimate. Rocket Raccoon was a character in that game, and the funny thing is I remember the internet's reaction to that. They're like, who is Rocket Raccoon? Why are they picking such an esoteric character? I don't know who he is. I don't care who he is. And then when they actually played him, they were like, oh shit, he's awesome. Like, he was hilarious in that game.
A lot of people are now realizing that was Disney's plan all along, was to get him back in, get the Guardians back into the people's minds. Even if through slight means. They also they brought back the Guardians in the comic books to help the Avengers fight Thanos shortly after the first film.
Oh wow!
In comic books, like out of nowhere. So they've been planning this for a long time, and they executed it with a lot of planning. And did it in the most fantastic way possible. They took what they're also helping evolve the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which could be really stuffy. It has potential to be really, really stuffy. Because not everybody is a witty character. Not every character is a smarmy, guy like Tony Stark is. So you need one of the things that the Marvel Universe does a lot better than the DC Cinematic Universe. It does a lot of things a lot better than the DC Cinematic Universe, but one of the major things that it makes is that the dialogue is fun. It's just, even if the plot is generic, it's just a world-saving plot. It's fun to be there because you're laughing at what they're saying while it's happening. So they've done this really well, and Guardians is like all that it doesn't matter what they're doing, it's going to be good, because who cares what they have to do? You just want to see them while they're doing it.
Well, the whole movie is Stop the MacGuffin.
One thing that Guardians of the Galaxy, one gap that it really fills in the current Marvel Cinematic Universe, is that they don't have a team that acts as a family unit. They don't. So the Marvel Universe right now doesn't have access to the Fantastic Four because they have their own licensing deal. They don't have access to the X-Men.
Yeah.
So there's a theme in both movies where all the characters, they're facing some level of parental abandonment or some level of having their previous families. They've all died in their origin stories, or they were an experiment like Rocket Raccoon. So one of the central themes of the movie is them coming together as a family. That's not present in the Avengers. It might be present in the Defenders, but that's a smaller scale than what they're trying with the Avengers movie right now. So it fills a gap. It has a different feeling than a lot of the other Marvel movies do.
That was actually going to be my major point about bringing up the Guardians, is that it was the first time, the second movie was the first time where I felt like the Marvel Cinematic Universe had something that was emotionally significant happening in it. There were other movies where things were portrayed as you were supposed to be caring about them. But this one actually was emotionally a heavy movie, despite being very entertaining and funny at the same time. It was very touching and had good points. The whole movie is about family, in short. I'm not going to ruin anything, but the whole movie is about relationships with your family and what the family that you make around you and it told a really great story, and it did so in a really entertaining way, and the characters were still themselves while it was happening. They still retained what made them them, but were allowed to show their vulnerable sides, and it was the first time I ever really saw Marvel getting like that. So, other than that, I did want to quickly mention that I am excited for Thor Ragnarok. Thor is actually the series that I least like out of all the Marvel movies, but the third one looks like they're doubling down on what could make Thor cool, which is the beautiful renditions of Asgard and things like that, clashing with almost like a metal tone to it, like heavy metal music. I think they should double down on that, like that metal music plus Vikings works really well together, and they should continue on with it.
There's a whole genre of music called Viking metal.
Yeah, they should be grasping that, like, really awesome things, and battles going along with over the top visuals.
Also, second boss of Lollipop Chainsaw.
Yeah. And one more final thing I did want to mention, kind of a teaser here, that Wonder Boy, I bought Wonder Boy Dragon's Curse remake for the Switch, and I did want to talk about that in Reactive this week. So I am a big fan of it, just as a teaser here, but I do want to wait until Thursday to go more in depth with it. And finally, I'll go into my weigh-in here. So I've gained actually a little bit of weight here, and I am once again thankful for this weigh-in because it keeps reminding me that I have to keep on task. Mm-hmm. One thing that people that may not have a problem with their weight may not realize is that people that do have weight problems have it tied to other issues generally. Either a medical or mental or emotional or any combination of the bunch. Mine is tied to my anxiety. So when I get anxious, one of my coping mechanisms is to eat, and I also eat when I'm having a good time too. So if I'm having a bad time or having a good time, I eat. So it's one of those things. I feel like I have an addictive personality, that goes along with my collecting and things that I'm into and very into, and I'm also into eating. It's just one of the things that hits all the same buttons. It's just that this one has more of an adverse effect. Thankfully, I'm not addicted to drugs, something worse, something like that. But I do feel like I have the propensity to crave things. So it's a good thing that I've stayed away from drugs, of course, but food can be just as bad for people. And this is one of those things where, I had a standardized test, and I was also having a really good time with my girlfriend, and I had a wedding yesterday that I went to. So good things and bad things, but they all contributed to it. So I got to get back and on the reminder. When I was losing a lot of weight when I was younger, I lost like 100 pounds during college very quickly. The losing the weight became my new thing that was gratifying. So I've been trying to capture that essence and maybe not be as stringent as I was while doing it, because I feel like I lost it very quickly. And maybe not in a very stressful way, rather than doing it the right way. I was doing it as kind of like a coping mechanism because I was so stressed out at the time during college. I'm trying to find that essence in trying to lose weight and be driven, but doing it in a healthy way. It's very tough for me. That is why, and I'm not looking for answers here or anything like that, But I did want to express this to anybody who has, or can even identify with the plight that I'm in. It's not that I don't have the will to lose weight. The will is there. It's very difficult for me. So I will continue with it, but it's great that I have this to remind me every week that I need to monitor it and then get back on task.
It's about health first and weight second. Weight
correct.
Is just a number.
Correct, and like I said before, my doctor actually praised me on how stable my weight was, a few weeks ago. So, even if it causes a lot of stress to have a major weight change. A lot of people don't realize that it can actually be quite bad for you, to be yo-yoing up and down. But staying stable is actually quite good, because your heart and the rest of your body is obtaining an equilibrium. I've been the same weight for roughly about the 6 months, the full year that we've been doing this, and I just gained a little bit of weight. It's not a lot. I'm at 229. So I want to get back into it and get back to the lower 20s again, 220s. But I'll do that within due time. But I'll make sure not to keep gaining. That having said that, we can move on to questions.
I have one tiny bit of trivia for Vyse.
Go ahead.
Sorry, since it's relevant to your topic.
Sure.
So Drax the Destroyer in Guardians of the Galaxy is played by Dave Bautista, who is prior to his movie star career, he was a wrestler of some renown and a former champion. And he was brought back to WWF right before the airing of the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie because they intended to put the title on him at WrestleMania 30, so he would be carrying it around when the movie came out when he was giving his interviews.
Oh, wow.
But that happened to coincide with the rise to extreme popularity of one of your other favorite wrestlers, one of the only guys you know of, despite not really watching it, which is Daniel Bryan. And instead of carrying the title, he graciously decided to be the guy who would submit to Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania 30, so Daniel Bryan would win the title in front of 80,000 screaming fans at New Orleans at the biggest and most famous WrestleMania to date. So I thought you'd like that little bit of
that's cool,
intersection between things you like.
I didn't know about that. That's great.
He was great. They brought him in as a face originally, but he turned into the traditional Hollywood heel. He gave some amazing interviews. He would boo himself.
He seems like a really cool guy in person, though. From what I understand, he's really gracious to his fans and things like that. He's
excellent in the movie too. That's wrestlers are always hit and miss when it comes to movie roles. And
he nails the role.
He was a huge hit as Drax.
Yeah, actually,
in the second movie, he's pretty much the entire thing that you laugh at the entire movie.
Awesome.
He steals the show in the second one. He's pretty much the focus of almost all the humor.
All right.
So it's quite great. So that's a good fact. But we should move on to questions here.
Yeah, I believe we have time for one. Diana Gohan asks, I have a question for you guys, since I remember you saying a few weeks ago who some of your favorite web content makers were. So since with Corrective and Reactive Consciousness, and this is the part I'm adding with a couple of Let's Plays among us, all three of us are on Channel Awesome, and Pyro is as well. Who are your favorite Channel Awesome producers, or ones you would want to cross over with, like how I did one with Lankara on Killer 7 comic books a while back? I don't know how much you guys actually follow Channel Awesome, but yeah, if there's anyone that who you particularly like.
As far as I could speak for YouTubers that I really enjoy. Because I don't have much to say about Channel Awesome in particular, but I'm actually a big fan of what Doug Walker does. Being the nostalgia critic, and I'm a big fan of James Rolfe. James Rolfe is a really great person in person. I've met him a couple times. He probably doesn't remember me because I'm with a bunch of faceless fans as well. But he's a really cool guy, and he's from New Jersey, where we're all from. So I come across him quite a bit in local conventions and things like that. And I also like his spirit, and he's also been around probably longer than pretty much any other YouTube star. That's part of the reason why he has so many followers. Is he was a trailblazer in this regard.
Mm-hmm.
I like all those guys. I would love to do something with the if I was graced with it to do something with the Laser Time guys. I love the Laser Time guys. I think I listen to all of their podcasts, and I really love their formats, and I think that Chris Antisto, who runs them all, in the host of all their podcasts, is really funny. So I would love to do something with them one of these days, because it would make me starstruck. And that's pretty much all I have to say.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to that because I'm not familiar with the channel Awesome People at all. I was unfortunately turned off really early. I had kind of a bad experience getting into the content creation, getting into their sort of content stream. I had gone to Lotus Prince's panel at MagFest, and I had a recommendation that I should try to play the Minority Report PS2 game because it was interesting. I think it was Everybody Runs. Is that the name of it? Vyse.
Yeah, it was also on the original Xbox as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say Spoony had a whole review on how shitty that game was.
And I hated that review. It was just like 15 minutes of him playing the game horribly and then complaining about how bad it was when the problem was him.
Oh, really? Was it?
That game is actually renowned as being pretty decent for a licensed title.
Oh, okay.
I will say it wasn't like great, but
decent. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was worth like buying at the used game like pile.
Sure.
Whatever game store I picked it up at. And I got really turned off really quickly with the the caustic critic style. I just watched this video and I was like I really liked his Ultima.
Yeah, the Ultima retrospective.
Retrospective. I like things that I like holistic reviews. I have the same view in terms of critiquing media as I think Vyse does, that you should understand what people were trying to do.
Yeah.
That you should look for the best. That you shouldn't highlight the negative, which I feel like is really common in internet reviews. And as much as we like some of these people, that's sort of how they make their money, because that's what people.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, you get more of a bombastic reaction. And,
I actually kind of want to jump off this. Maybe this goes along with your point. And I was kind of talking with this about to my dad. If you turn your memories back to like something in high school where I wasn't the most popular guy, but I had a decent amount of friends. Yeah. And I think we all had our own friend groups, but there's always we probably got picked on, but we weren't like the bottom of the pile, right?
Sure.
But there are people out there that just don't have many friends, and that get picked on by everybody. And kind of everybody does it, and you kind of wake up from it every once in a while, and you're like, man, I shouldn't be picking on that person. Yeah. And I think it's just something innately human. I think humans do that as a social pecking order kind of thing, and you kind of have to stop yourself from doing it. Like the nicest of us sometimes even have trouble with picking on something that everybody else is hating on. My point of this is that it's very easy to do that to something that has some flaws. Yeah. So people love to dogpile on negativity and double down on it. And it's not as easy to do that on positivity. And I think that's why as much as I like the Angry Video Game Nerd segments, I actually like James's other segments even better. I like some of the things.
I like his James and Mike stuff.
Yeah.
I like the Board James segments. Like, he's really smart, and he's really good at dissecting what makes a game interesting.
And honestly, even the more recent Video Game Nerd videos have been a little more subdued. Like, he'll have a crazy reaction because you gotta have one of those, but he's a lot more like, so here's what the game does, and then like until he gets to a sucky part, he'll just like kind of just talk you through it. Like even when Sonic 06, he wasn't as screamingly furious as he would have been like 7 or 8 years ago.
He also, like, people have to remember that Angry Video Game Nerd segment was actually a parody of what people were doing on the internet at the time. Right. He just happened to add a lot more production value to it than a lot of other people did, because he was a fan of film and a fan of independent production and things like that. So he had some training in and some skill and some desire to make something that was more professionally put together, and also, he wanted to showcase things like practical effects, which he's a huge fan of.
Yeah, and actually, ironically enough, he had to evolve kind of past his own style, because despite parodying the "man, I hate this stuff" kind of style of review, because he was so good, the market became saturated with what OldManStompy referred to as the caustic reviewers. So at this point, he can still ride on that because he's the guy, but even so, like, you can't just sit there and scream at a camera anymore. So now he still has the production values, but he's also taking a different tack because, he himself is evolving as well.
Well, he's also, you have to remember that he is not that kind of person in real life. He's
really laid back.
He's very much the opposite, a very nice guy who is very positive about a lot of things. And in fact, part of the reason why I like his channel so much is that he is a huge film fan, but he likes the stuff he likes. He's not a snob. He's not after the particular artsy crowd films. He loves a lot of movies that showcase practical effects, a lot of like 80s and 90s, 50s, 60s, 70s,
and a lot of trauma stuff too.
Yeah, he just loves science fiction, old science fiction movies, and things like he's doing his 50 favorite movies of all time, and he has like stuff like The Blob on it, which is not a great movie in as much as a cinematic masterpiece, but it's great culturally, and it's a fun thing to watch, and also like really interesting in terms of its history. So he like us kind of has a holistic view on things. It's kind of funny that he helped birth popularity of something that he was trying to make fun of and point out was goofy. But what I was gonna say, that just goes to my original thought that I think negativity is very easy to fall into. I think it's something that we're built for, and I'm not really sure what it is about us, but I feel like it's just something that we have to struggle with, and we're not naturally we naturally want to dogpile on something that has flaws. It's just one of those things.
So I'll end my sort of answer to this question on a positive note, in that there are some content creators that I really like. My wife listens to a podcast, not us, of course, but I mean also us. But so actually, this sort of I thought about this while we were starting this podcast. She listens to a podcast called Cortex, which is done by Brady Harron and CGP Grey, who are two of the primary pedagogues on YouTube. CGP Grey has a lot of short educational videos about things like politics and science. And Brady Harron, you might know, is the creator of the Number File channel, which posts a lot of videos about mathematical oddities explained by enthusiasts and by professors. He also does 60 Symbols, and there's another one he does, which is astronomy. But he's a filmographer who posts a lot of short educational videos that are also really interesting and engaging for common fans. It makes it accessible to people who aren't necessarily scientists. So I like those guys a lot. They have a podcast, and I listened to a couple of episodes of it, and it's like the podcast is about Brady Harron interviewing CGP Grey to understand how a very intelligent person's mind works, and it's like the most asinine bullshit half the time. It's about like how he organizes his pockets, and about how he organizes like his iPad screen. And it's like this is not the part of CGP Grey's life that is interesting. I'm not learning anything. He's just talking to me about how he organizes his fucking iPhone. Like, I really don't care about this, but I also can't stop listening to it.
Yeah, it's entertaining.
And I realize, like, this is my life. This is my, like, I'm a podcaster now. This is what people are coming to our channel to listen to. Like,
yes.
Nobody cares I'm a physicist. They just want to hear us talk about video games for an hour and a half, and another hour 2 days later. Except for the one guy who asked a question about a white hole. Anyway,
yes.
I'd love to work with them. I'd also love to do a collaborative project, not that I have any entry point into it, with some of the members of the Magic the Gathering creative community, because with a handful of exceptions, they're largely extremely positive and very inclusive. And That includes most of the major professional players who stream or create content for their websites or for YouTube. So all of them are fantastic people for the most part.
That's awesome.
All right.
So how about you, Lotus? Since you're the... okay, I forgot. There is one channel awesome collaborator I would like to work with, and I have, which is Lotus Prince. Whoa!
Actually, yeah, I think we've mentioned this before, but you were, in fact, the first person I collaborated with for Let's Play on Harvester of all games in the world. I was just like, I gotta have somebody play this with me, because doing it by myself would not do it justice. It was before Barkley.
Wow.
I think it was. But, yeah, so as for my favorite Channel Awesome producers, of course, I enjoy Doug Walker, Nostalgia Critics' work, and Linkara's as well. But of those who have not been mentioned, I also really get a kick out of Brad Jones as both the Cinema Snob and just chatting about movies he saw tonight on his Midnight Screenings videos. And I also very much enjoy Bennett the Sage's look at usually like 90s and 2000s, like early 2000s anime and OVA dubs, because his focus is stuff you would have watched on TV or VHS back in the day, and
that's awesome.
If it was on TV, it was definitely dubbed, and if it was on VHS, let's face it, everybody now is into subs, but like back then it was like, why would I want to listen to it in a language I understand? So like a lot of people went for dub back then, including me.
Japanimation.
Yeah. So now if
Suncoast Video.
Suncoast Video. Now if I were to do crossovers with any Channel Awesome producers, I wouldn't mind doing a few with Linkara again, because I could think of other just video game comics that would make me relevant, because comic reviews are really, even though I wrote that crossover, that's clearly more of his wheelhouse. Like, I would just be there to justify, like, oh, this is how it was in the game. But I would also, if Bennett the Sage ever does the early 2000s JoJo's Bizarre Adventure OVA, I would freaking love the opportunity to get in on that, because that would just be tons of fun. Like, I don't get the chance to really showcase JoJo on my channel very often, despite how many times I try to refer to it, except for the PS4 game. But like, that would be a wonderful opportunity to get on like an actual review of the OVA, especially because the OVA is kind of expensive to get nowadays because it was discontinued due to did I ever tell you guys why it was?
Go for it.
It was a really weird quirk. There's one scene where Hull Horse, the guy with the Emperor stand, the gun, is eventually like, why am I even following Dio? This is bullshit. This isn't working out for me. So he's getting ready to sneak up on Dio and assassinate him. And he's trying to catch Dio while he's facing the other way and reading a book. But then Dio teleports behind him, and it's like, oh my god, Dio's too powerful for me. I can't deal. But in the scene where Dio's reading a book...
It's because of the book?
It is because of the book.
Wow.
It's really weird because Dio is in Egypt, right? The second half of part 3 of JoJo takes place in Egypt because that's where Dio's staying. So the Japanese animators were like, well, let's make it authentic. Let's get some stuff in Arabic. So, and this is before good internet. So they were just like, let's just grab the first Arabic we can find. Which
that's always an issue.
Yeah, and the most likely place that would be is some verse from the Quran. So Dio was reading the Quran. Now, I don't think this bothered anyone because OMG, the Quran's in the show. No. But really,
it's because it's a religious belief. Yeah.
Well, I mean, even people might have been bothered by it, but also Dio, like, biggest piece of shit, blood-sucking vampire, villain of the whole series, and he's like, I'm taking inspiration for the Quran. Like, that's not a good message, accidental though it may have been. So it's like, let's nix that. So, and he's
also like a student of the world. He would have read something like that.
He would have, but like, that's what you're catching him reading. Like, again, villain of the series, blood-sucking vampire. Like, I mean, yeah, if you're gonna read like the most popular book in the world, there it is. But like, it doesn't send a very good message, So like, and this is before internet distribution. Of course, you could pirate it now, but like, there was no Crunchyroll at the time, so it was DVD only. So they killed production. So while you can find torrents of the anime now, if you want to buy a copy, it's kind of hard to do. And I don't think they're going to re-release it anytime soon, unless they have some edit. But I don't think there's any mention of that
during
whatsoever.
one of those ridiculous Right Stuff sales. We got the
you found you got a fucking steal. It was like $60 for the box set. Even at like the normal price was supposed to be $120, but it's probably more than that now just because of its like relative notoriety. Like you freaking got away with murder. And like the funny thing was, you're like, could you buy 3 sets? One for you, one for me, one for Luminaire, and you're like, okay. It was like really easy. But yeah, so long story short, I would like to cross over with Linkara again if I could, or with Bennett the Sage if he tackles that in particular. Or, I was going to say if he ever did Slayers, but he did like a movie, because covering an entire 26-episode series is not really, like, that. He doesn't tend to do stuff like that, so probably stick with JoJo if I could. But anyway, nice. I believe that's what we have time for today.
Yeah, we definitely were a little long in the tooth, but I think we had some really great discussions here this week. So that's the show. We want to thank all of our fans that contributed questions, the one fan in this case, and please keep us supplied with these awesome topics by submitting questions of your own via YouTube and SoundCloud pages. While there, please give us thumbs up, likes, and 5-star ratings on iTunes. It helps us promote this and spread awareness of the show, and any bit of encouragement keeps the show going. You can also catch us on Thursdays on our sister podcast, Corrective Consciousness, the in-depth look at this week in pop culture. Finally, you can friend me as VyseTheBold, VyseTheBold, on Steam, PSN, Xbox Live, and Twitter.
And as for me, you could follow me on my YouTube channel, Lotus Prince, or you could follow me on Twitter at Lotus Prince, all one word.
And you can find me as OldManStompy basically everywhere I want to be found, so give it a shot.
Great. Well, and that's the show for the week. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you on Thursday.
Until next time, everyone.
Cheers.